Welcome to Manitoba. While it might not be the most historically renowned province in Canada, or the most influential, Manitoba is full of small-town charm and historical facts. So don't be fooled by its modest appearance. There's much this province can teach us about the heart and soul of Canada. Let's roll. Located in the longitudinal center of Canada, Manitoba borders Saskatchewan to the west, Ontario to the east, Nunavut to the north, and the American states of North Dakota and Minnesota to the south. Although the border with Saskatchewan appears straight on large-scale maps, it actually has many right-angled corners that give the appearance of a slanted line. Manitoba is the sixth largest Canadian province. The capital and largest city is Winnipeg. In elevation, Manitoba ranges from sea level down by the Hudson Bay to 2,727 feet, that is 831 meters, on top of Baldy Mountain. As a result, all waters in the province flow into the Hudson Bay. Lake Winnipegosis and Lake Winnipeg are two of its largest lakes. The northern 60% of the province is on the Canadian Shield, meaning most of the province only has a very thin layer of soil under which you would essentially find rocks. So agriculture there is not possible. Not to mention that these regions are also covered in permafrost, that is permanently frozen subsoil, and a section of tundra bordering the Hudson Bay. Manitoba has a somewhat extreme climate, but still its southernmost latitudes allow for agriculture. Also, before settlement had occurred, a vast portion of southern Manitoba was either floodplain or swamp, so an extensive system for drainage ditches was required throughout southern central Manitoba to make the region suitable for cultivation. Manitoba is far from the moderating influences of mountain ranges or large bodies of water, and so with its generally flat landscape, it is exposed to cold Arctic high-pressure air masses from the northwest during January and February, while in the summer, warm humid air is drawn northwards from the Gulf of Mexico, meaning winters are really freaking cold and summers are a bit too warm. Interestingly, the southern regions of the province are prone to tornadoes. In 2016, there were 16 confirmed tornado touchdowns in this area. The most notable was an F5 that devastated parts of Elie, marking it as the strongest tornado ever recorded in Canada. Under current Manitoba legislation, an urban municipality must have a minimum population of 7,500 to be named a city. As such, Manitoba has 10 cities, with a cumulative population of some 900,000 people, while the whole province has a population of over 1.3 million. Winnipeg is the largest city in the province by a large margin, with some 750,000, and Brandon is the second largest with some 50,000. A place that piques my curiosity is Churchill, sometimes referred to as the polar bear capital of the world. Every autumn, as the ice begins to form on the Hudson Bay, polar bears migrate to the area, waiting for the ice to solidify so they can hunt seals. This migration offers visitors a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to observe them up close. Churchill is also one of the best places on the planet to witness the Northern Lights. The town's location beneath the auroral oval ensures frequent and spectacular displays, especially during the long winter nights. During the summer months, thousands of beluga whales migrate to the Churchill River. These friendly and curious whales can often be seen swimming and playing in the waters near the town. Visitors can enjoy unique experiences like kayaking or boating alongside them. The privately owned port of Churchill is Canada's principal seaport on the Arctic Ocean. The port was originally constructed by the government in the 1930s. It is the only Arctic Ocean seaport connected to the North American railway grid, and it is capable of servicing Panamax-sized vessels, meaning it can service ships up to and even larger than the largest ships that pass through the Panama Canal. Another interesting place I was recently reading about was Thompson. Thompson was established in the 1950s due to the discovery of one of the largest nickel deposits in the world. Today, it is the most populated municipality in northern Manitoba, and as such, it is one of the largest fully planned communities in Canada. Thompson has fewer than 15,000 residents, with many of the smaller communities accessible only by air or winter roads. Despite its isolated location in the heart of Canada's boreal forest, the city is served by an all-weather road and Manitoba Highway 6. And of course, you have Winnipeg. The coldest temperature ever recorded in Winnipeg was minus 47.8 Celsius, that is minus 54 Fahrenheit, in December 1879. So for a long time, Winnipeg was the coldest city in the world, with a population of 600,000 or more. But Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia has moved into first place since then. The hottest temperature ever recorded in Winnipeg was 42.2 Celsius, that is 108 Fahrenheit, on July 11th, 1936. So yeah, living here is just as extreme as many cities in Siberia. The most visited tourist attraction in Manitoba is likely the Forks National Historical Site, located at the confluence of the Red and the Assiniboine Rivers. The Forks has been a meeting place for indigenous peoples for thousands of years and played a key role in the early development of Winnipeg, and it is now a popular tourist trap with lots of shops and restaurants. The geographical area of modern-day Manitoba was inhabited by the First Nations people shortly after the last Ice Age, approximately 10,000 years ago. The first humans in southern Manitoba left behind pottery shards, spear and arrowheads, copper, petroforms, pictographs, and animal bones, and signs of agriculture. Eventually there were Aboriginal settlements of Ojibwa, Cree, Dene, Sioux, Mandan, and Assiniboine peoples, along with other tribes that entered the area to trade. There were many land trails made as part of a larger native trading network on both land and water. Henry Hudson, in 1611, was one of the first Europeans to sail into what is now known as the Hudson Bay. But the first European to reach what is now northern Manitoba was Sir Thomas Button in 1612, who named the Nelson River, and he hoped to find a trade route to China. In 1690, Henry Kelsey was the first European to travel from Hudson Bay to the prairies, reporting the buffalo and grizzly bears that he saw along the way. Kelsey went as far as present-day Saskatchewan. When the British ship Nonsuch sailed into the Hudson Bay in 1668-1669, she was the first fur trading vessel to reach the area. The voyage led to the formation of the Hudson Bay Company, to which the British government gave absolute control of the entire Hudson Bay watershed. The Hudson Bay Company, founded in 1670, is one of the oldest commercial enterprises in the world. Its history is deeply intertwined with the development of Manitoba and the broader Canadian West. Initially established to exploit the fur trade in North America, the HBC operated through a vast network of trading posts centered around the Hudson Bay. These posts became hubs of commerce and interaction between European traders and the indigenous peoples. French traders would also arrive a little later in 1730s. As French explorers entered the area, a Montreal-based company, the Northwest Company, began trading with the Métis. The British and the French traders were fierce rivals, and many battles ensued between them. Great Britain secured the territory in 1763 as a result of their victory over France in the 7 Years' War. The territory at the time included Rupert's Land, which incorporated the entire Hudson Bay watershed. At the beginning of the 19th century, Thomas Douglas, the 5th Earl of Selkirk, attempted to resettle his fellow Scotsmen in North America. By 1808, Selkirk had founded 2 colonies, one on Prince Edward Island and another at Baldoon in Western Ontario, and he was looking to establish a third. The eastern coastline of Canada was already settled and no longer had any tracts of land large enough to support a colony, so Selkirk looked for a location with good soil and a temperate climate far into the interior. He quickly discovered the region best fitting his needs fell within the territory of the Hudson Bay Company. So in 1808, Selkirk began buying shares of the HBC in order to acquire the land he needed. Because of the crippling competition with the Northwest Company, the HBC stock at the time was quite affordable, and he was able to buy a majority share, equaling £100,000, while the whole of the HBC stock was worth about $150,000 at the time. So in May 1811, the HBC granted Selkirk 116,000 square miles of company territory, which encompassed most of the Red River watershed. So in 1812, Selkirk embarked on an ambitious project to establish an agricultural community known as the Red River Colony, nestled north of the area that would eventually become downtown Winnipeg. Lord Selkirk envisioned a thriving agricultural hub where Scottish colonists could rebuild their lives. However, the establishment of the Red River Colony was not without its challenges, as the region was already home to the Métis, a community of mixed indigenous and European heritage. The Métis had established an economy based on hunting, fishing, and trading with the Northwest Company, a fierce rival of the HBC. This resulted in conflict between the British colonists and the Métis, and between the fur trading companies that were supporting them. The ensuing conflict was known as the Pemmican War, that lasted between 1812 and 1821. Rupert's Land was eventually ceded to Canada in 1870. This transfer marked a significant shift in power and governance, as the land was incorporated into the Northwest Territories. However, for the Métis inhabitants of the Red River Valley, this change brought uncertainty and unrest. They saw the new Canadian Authority as indifferent to their rights and concerns, particularly regarding land ownership and cultural recognition. Frustrated and determined to protect their interests, they launched what would become known as the Red River Rebellion. Louis Riel, a visionary leader and passionate advocate for Métis rights, emerged as a central figure in this struggle. Recognizing the need for organized resistance, Riel and his supporters established a provisional government, boldly naming the area as Manitoba. The provisional government, led by Riel, engaged in intense negotiations with the Canadian government. These discussions culminated in the passage of the Manitoba Act in 1870. This landmark legislation created the province of Manitoba and laid the foundation for its entry into the Canadian Confederation. The Act also addressed some of Métis' key concerns, including land rights and cultural protection, marking a significant victory for Riel and his followers. Soon after its establishment in 1870, Manitoba earned the nickname the Postage Stamp Province due to its compact size. At its inception, Manitoba was 1/18 of the province's current size, a far cry from the expansive territory it would become. But in 1881, Manitoba's borders were expanded, incorporating land from the Northwest Territories and the district of Keewatin. The province's final and most significant expansion occurred in 1912, as Manitoba absorbed additional land from the Northwest Territories, extending its reach all the way to the 60th parallel north, creating a uniform northern boundary and solidifying the province's modern dimensions. As the fur trade declined in the late 19th century, the HBC adapted by shifting its focus to retail and real estate. The company's trading posts evolved into general stores and eventually modern department stores that became fixtures in Manitoba's urban centers, particularly in Winnipeg, which by the early 20th century had transformed into a bustling metropolis and proudly stood as the third largest city in Canada. This dramatic rise was fueled by a confluence of factors that turned the city into a beacon of opportunity and prosperity. Winnipeg's meteoric growth began in the late 19th century, driven by a surge of outside investment, immigration, and the expansion of the railways. The Canadian Pacific Railway, completed in 1885, positioned Winnipeg as a critical transportation hub, connecting the east and west of Canada. The railways brought an influx of goods, people, and capital, making Winnipeg a vital link in Canada's economic chain. Waves of immigrants, particularly from Eastern Europe and the British Isles, settled there, bringing diverse cultures and skills that enriched the city. The city's economy flourished with new businesses sprouting up, from small enterprises to large industrial ventures. The prosperity of this era is still visible in Winnipeg's architectural heritage, as the cityscape is dotted with grand old mansions and estates, once home to the burgeoning wealthy class. However, the optimism that fueled Winnipeg's rapid expansion began to wane around the time of the First World War. The war effort redirected resources and attention away from civilian investments, and the post-war economic landscape was different. The once robust flow of investment slowed, and Winnipeg's growth began to decelerate. Instead, other Canadian cities started to rise. Cities like Calgary emerged as new centers of economic activity, driven by industries such as oil and gas. In the early 20th century, Manitoba farmers faced significant challenges in shipping out their grain. Frustrated by the inefficiencies and high costs, they lobbied for a more direct route, their own grain port on the Hudson Bay. This led to the ambitious creation of the Hudson Bay Railway. Initial surveys considered two potential ports, Churchill and Port Nelson. Construction commenced, and the Canadian research ship CSS Acadia was dispatched to chart the port and the shipping routes into the Hudson Bay. However, Port Nelson soon encountered severe engineering difficulties and escalating costs. The outbreak of the First World War further complicated matters, leading to its abandonment. In 1918, the Canadian Northern Railway went bankrupt, and the newly formed Canadian National Railways took over the project. The federal government now aimed to complete the Hudson Bay Railway, but opted to build the line towards Churchill instead. CSS Acadia was once again called upon to survey the new route. The construction faced numerous obstacles, including political and financial challenges, as well as the difficult terrain of muskeg and rock outcrops on the Canadian Shield. Despite these difficulties, the Hudson Bay Railway and the port at Churchill were finally complete in 1929. Although the HBR never became a major grain handling link as it was intended, it provided transportation to areas still inaccessible by road. Entering World War II, plans to downgrade the line changed when US military required it to handle 300 cars per day and stationed about 7,000 service personnel at Churchill and along its route. When Canada entered the Second World War in 1939, Winnipeg became a major command center for the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. This ambitious program aimed to train fighter pilots and aircrew from across the Commonwealth. Air training schools sprang up throughout Manitoba, turning the province into a hub of military activity. Young men from Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand honed their flying skills in the skies above Manitoba, preparing for the intense aerial combat that awaited them overseas. Several regiments from Manitoba were deployed to various theaters of war. Among them was the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, a distinguished unit with a storied history. These brave soldiers left the prairies of Manitoba to fight in Europe, Africa, and Asia, contributing significantly to the Allied war effort. In 1942, in a creative and dramatic effort to raise funds for the war, Manitoba launched the Victory Loan Campaign. One of the most memorable events of this campaign was the If Day, a simulated Nazi invasion and occupation of Manitoba. The event was planned and executed, complete with fake battles, air raid sirens, and mock surrender of the city. The simulation was designed to give Manitobans a taste of what life under Nazi occupation might be like, stirring a strong emotional response and a sense of urgency. The impact was profound, and If Day successfully captured the public's imagination and support. So the Victory Loan Campaign managed to raise over 65 million Canadian dollars. In 1950, Winnipeg faced one of the most devastating natural disasters in its history, the Red River Flood. This catastrophic event forced the partial evacuation of the city. That year, the Red River swelled to its highest level since 1861, inundating most of the Red River Valley. The floodwaters spread across vast areas, submerging homes, businesses, and farmlands. The destruction was widespread and severe, causing immense hardship for the residents of Winnipeg and surrounding communities. thousands of people were displaced. The community came together with neighbors helping each other to escape the rising waters and salvage what they could. The scale of the disaster made it clear that something had to be done to protect Winnipeg from future floods. They proposed the construction of the Red River Floodway, a massive engineering project designed to divert floodwaters around the city. And after 6 years of extensive excavation, the Red River Floodway was complete in 1968. In addition to the floodway, other protective measures were implemented. 8 towns south of Winnipeg saw the construction of permanent dikes, providing a first line of defense against rising waters. Within Winnipeg itself, clay dikes and diversion dams were built to enhance the city's flood protection infrastructure, which would all be pushed to its limits, especially during the 1997 Red River flood, leading to further expansions of the floodway.
Winnipeg, the capital of Manitoba, and the oldest and largest city of the Great Plains. It stands on the Red River, where once there was a fur trading port. Portage Avenue used to be only a settler's wagon trail to the west. Now, over 350,000 people live in Greater Winnipeg. They earn their bread and butter doing all kinds of things. They keep stores, work in clothing factories, and carry on a modern version of the old fur trade. A great many are busy processing what comes in from the country. They slaughter cattle, pack meat in huge packing plants. They tan cattle hides. They work in mills where grain is ground into feed and flour. Some of the flour manufactured here is baked into bread in Winnipeg, but most of it is shipped out to other markets, the United Kingdom, Trinidad, Cuba, for example. Railway traffic is the main reason for Winnipeg's size and importance, and many people work in the huge rail yards. The flow of traffic is heavy, for Winnipeg is the connecting point that links eastern Canada and the west. The first single line was pushed through to the distant Pacific in 1885. Now a vast railway network reaches westward from Winnipeg into the prairies like the branches of a tree. This was the next part of the Great Plains to be settled, and settlement followed the railway.
Today's Manitoba boasts a diverse economy, with strengths in agriculture, manufacturing, mining, and hydroelectric power. Winnipeg is a major center for trade and transportation and is home to leading research institutions, including the National Microbiology Laboratory. Manitoba is known for its rich cultural diversity, with vibrant communities from all over the world. Festivals like the Folklorama celebrate this multicultural heritage. The province supports a thriving art scene with events like the Winnipeg Fringe Theatre Festival and the Royal Winnipeg Ballet. While real estate demand in Canada has never been higher, the cost of living remains kind of affordable compared to other major Canadian cities, and the province as a whole offers a high quality of life with accessible healthcare and education. Still, even in its largest cities, Manitoba retains a small-town charm with close-knit communities and a friendly atmosphere. And I hope now you know a little bit more about it. Please fill me in about other interesting historical details I haven't discovered yet in the comments, or suggest future videos. And next, why not watch my video on Nova Scotia? And this is my Patreon map. Everyone on this map is a legend. Thank you all so much. GeoPerspective out.